Elasticity of demand measures the responsiveness of quantity demanded for a product to the change in its price. We can measure elasticity of demand in three different ways: applying the percentage formula, point elasticity formula, or arc elasticity formula. In all these methods, there appears a negative sign in result due to the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. We have to ignore the negative sign by taking absolute value. For example, if we find elasticity of demand, which is denoted by E equals minus 1.2, the absolute value will be 1.2. We must take absolute value to learn different types of demand based on elasticity. Based on price elasticity, demand can be of 5 types: elastic demand, inelastic demand, unitary elastic demand, perfectly inelastic demand, and perfectly elastic demand. We shall learn them one by one. First, elastic demand. Demand is said to be elastic when the absolute value of price elasticity of demand we measure using the percentage, point, or arc elasticity formula is greater than 1. According to the percentage formula, elasticity of demand equals percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price. Hence, when elasticity of demand is greater than 1, it means percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than percentage change in price. That is, quantity demanded changes by a larger percentage than the price change. For example, if the absolute value of elasticity of demand is 1.5, it means if price rises by 10%, quantity demanded falls by 1.5 into 10 equals 15%. Clearly, the response in quantity demanded is more than the change in price. We can explain it in figure. The figure shows the demand curve. When we move along the demand curve from point A to B, price falls from P1 to P2 and quantity demanded rises from Q1 to Q2. Clearly, change in quantity demanded Q1 Q2 is relatively large than the change in price P1 P2. So it indicates elastic demand. When demand is elastic, the demand curve is relatively flat to demonstrate relatively larger change in quantity demanded than price. The second type of demand based on elasticity is inelastic demand. Demand is said to be inelastic when the absolute value of price elasticity of demand is less than 1. When elasticity of demand is less than 1, the percentage formula says that the percentage change in quantity demanded is smaller than the percentage change in price. That is, quantity demanded changes by a smaller percentage than the price change. For example, if the absolute value of elasticity of demand is 0.7, it means if price rises by 10%, quantity demanded falls by 0.7 into 10 equals 7%. Clearly, the response in quantity demanded is less than the change in price. Let us see how it appears in figure. In figure, when we move along the demand curve from A to B, price falls from P1 to P2 and quantity demanded rises from Q1 to Q2. Clearly, change in quantity demanded Q1 Q2 is relatively smaller than the change in price P1 P2, so it indicates inelastic demand. When demand is inelastic, the demand curve is relatively steep to demonstrate relatively smaller change in quantity demanded than price. Demand is said to be unitary elastic when the absolute value of price elasticity of demand is equal to 1. According to the percentage formula, elasticity of demand equals percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price. Hence, when elasticity of demand equals 1, it means percentage change in quantity demanded is equal to percentage change in price. That is, the quantity demanded changes by exactly the same percentage as the price change. For example, if price rises by 10%, quantity demanded falls by 10% as well. In figure, I have shown the change in price P1 P2 and the change in quantity Q1 Q2 same. But it doesn't actually make sense for a unitary elastic demand curve. When demand is unitary elastic, total revenue remains the same at all points of the demand curve, which can be shown by a rectangular hyperbola. Hence, unitary elastic demand curve is rectangular hyperbolic. Then comes the perfectly inelastic demand. In case of perfectly inelastic demand, elasticity of demand is 0. In this case, quantity demanded for a good doesn't respond to the change in price of that good at all. That is, there will be no change in quantity demanded due to the change in price. Perfectly inelastic demand can be demonstrated by a vertical demand curve. In figure, the vertical demand curve indicates that if we move from point A to B, price falls from P1 to P2, but there is no change in quantity demanded. It means quantity demanded doesn't respond to the change in price, and thus demand is perfectly inelastic. Finally, perfectly elastic demand. In case of perfectly elastic demand, the elasticity of demand is infinity, meaning that there will be a large change in quantity demanded without any change or infinitesimal change in price. In other words, for perfectly elastic demand, responsiveness in quantity demanded for a product is very high, even if there is no change in price or the change in price is so insignificant to ignore. We can show the perfectly elastic demand by a horizontal demand curve. In figure, if we move from A to B along the demand curve, there is no change in price, but quantity demanded rises from Q1 to Q2. That is, there is a large change in quantity demanded without a change in price, which is true for perfectly elastic demand. This is how elasticity of demand guides us to decide on the types of demand.